pronounced your name correctly.
Correct.
Who is from the DEP, and he was here on March 11th to help us understand more deeply the revisions to shoreland zoning that the DEP has proposed, and also as they relate to the updating of our own shoreland zoning ordinance. And we got stuck on a couple of questions that we really felt we needed the answers to in order to proceed with our shoreline zoning maps, which have to be adopted by law with, because of federal legislation with flood hazard insurance, flood hazard maps. And so this is a follow-up, and we have Judy Colby George with us, who is doing our GIS mapping for us. And it's really behooves us to have both of them communicating, because some of Judy's questions really the planning board and the planner couldn't answer, but the DEP can. So we're hoping that this whole meeting with all of us together will clear things up. So I'm calling this meeting to order. That's the agenda. We aren't going to take a vote. We don't have a quorum, but we're not going to take a vote. So I'd like to, starting with Judy, have folks introduce themselves.
Judy Colby George from Viewshed. Margaret McIntyre, the interim town planner.
Ned Simmons.
Oh, my gosh.
Ned Simmons.
We worked with Jeff to kind of meet the requirements of the main DEP. And I just kind of felt like the product that we came out with met their standards, but it didn't totally make sense. It was hard for the homeowners to understand. I think it would have been easy for the codes office to interpret, because it's just, this is the standard, this is what it shows on the map. But I just feel like we kind of missed the mark a little bit, and I am really interested in figuring out what we're asking for, to figure out what our next step is. And I asked Judy to pull up Pole Island because I feel like it's a great example. So if you go,
Judy has no idea where.
I did.
well, you go.
I did have a few things before we.
Oh,
jump
yes,
in.
I'm so sorry, Jeff.
Oh, no problem at all. I didn't really get this all to myself until now.
But before you start, I just want to add to what Margaret said, which is that, and it was something that you said at the March 11th meeting, which is that while these maps aren't legal maps, but they are actually used to define the boundaries of the zone. So they kind of have their foot in both camps, which is why the homeowner who looks at the maps was so concerned about how their property was designated.
Well, they are legal maps. If I said they weren't, I clearly misspoke.
Okay.
I mean, once you adopt them, once the zone's shown, that's a legal requirement.
But the absolute boundary is
The
not
absolute
necessary.
boundary can be measured. The map shows that the zone exists, but then you go find whatever the hat is on that property and measure it.
Okay.
So it's open to interpretations and things like that, boundary lines, but I mean, it is a legal
Okay,
document.
thank you.
For sure, so, sorry if I misspoke.
No, I didn't.
So, the FEMA maps have driven a lot of municipalities to look at the Resource Protection District and remapping. Margaret kind of at the lead, at the head there early on, and I gave her the existing policy that we had, and we kind of churned through it. It was pretty eye-opening for me last time I was here to see the struggle. Not only board members, but community members had some questions. So there's 4 of us in the state, 4 shoreline zoning coordinators. Others have been running into this. So we actually all kind of got together and really come out hopefully with a more simplified understanding of it. I mean, the old one I struggled with, it was like almost a negative. And I don't know, it didn't make sense. I mean, basically what we're looking at now for looking at maps is as if there are 2 structures within 500 feet of shore frontage. It's going to be currently developed. Or dropping the hole as long as it's maintained in 1,000 feet. And that was always a little bit confusing. So hopefully that's a simpler way to look at things. We're willing to look at it in all zones, not just the wildlife, which is where it was developed, but also in the 100-year floodplain, also in contiguous. The 2 main areas, just contiguous slopes. So I think that would simplify how this is being looked at. I mean, basically, you're looking at measuring between dwellings. Are they within 500 feet? And just going along the shoreline, looking at the shore frontage. I mean, some areas should just fall right out. They're going to be RP. There's nothing there, and then other areas. They're lined right up. So, and it would be the whole property. Once 2 dwellings are within 500 feet, the RP is drawn on lot lines. Not, that lot is out. Those 2 lots are out, or whatever. How many lots are out? It's just we're using dwellings to identify the the criteria of currently developed.
You said structures. Do you mean principal
Dwellings.
structures? Okay.
Yeah, dwellings. A boathouse just sitting there, we wouldn't count.
All right.
So if you look at the Pole Island example,
Yeah, let's go. I just wanted to make so that we're all working on the.
Wait, I have one more question before we get to Pole Island. You said that the word developed was meant for the inland fishery, the wading bird habitat?
That's where it first started.
But even though it's like at the beginning of RP, so you would think that it applies to every category.
It does apply to every category. Where we are seeing it, where it was mostly of concern, I don't know if you were involved in this stuff in 2007 when all the IWWH came out. There was a lot of, and the Department of State said you had to put this in RP. You don't have to anymore, but that was a big ask. And so they were looking for criteria that you wouldn't have to, because some of these areas people live there, and again, that's the same problem. And it applies to all of them. Where I'm seeing it now, I mean, that's the IWWH is kind of all settled out, and communities have it or they don't, because you don't have to have it anymore. So what's really brought it to our attention this time is the FEMA maps, because it's having widespread change on RP. I mean, the contiguous slopes hasn't really changed much, but we're throwing that in there as well. While municipalities are remapping, you can take a look at this as well. But it applies to everything, and if there's something other than what I've brought up, FEMA or slopes, talk about that too.
This going forward, is this going forward, as far as adding new dwellings that are, does that?
That would, if you're remapping your RP, you can look at current and past mapping. No, it's all up for grabs. I think Harpswell didn't have their RP accurately mapped. So it's kind of like we're beginning.
Starting over, so if,
But if there was a RP,
if
and we
this
were remapping, we can look at the whole thing.
can, or is that, I mean, is it optional, or is it discretionary?
Yeah, if you don't have to apply what we've come up with as a definition for currently developed.
Right.
That would be more restrictive. Municipalities can be more restrictive.
Right, but we'd have to justify it to the people who we tell we can't build a house there. That's the problem. If
I'm
we're
not
more-
saying you should be more restrictive. I totally understand.
understand that.
That was a question that was asked, and yes, you can be more restrictive, and I'm very familiar with hurdles to being more restrictive.
Okay, I understand. And I'm not being critical. If you look at Pole Island, that iteration is different than the iteration that we had on, when we started this project. We had no RP on Pole Island.
Okay, so why is the RP there now?
I don't know.
There's two reasons there's RP on Pole Island. The first, the south end, is because it's in the flood zone. And the west side is because it's got sustained slopes of 20% or more. But because the other end of the other side of the island has houses, it's not RP, even though it is still steep, or even though it might still be in the flood zone.
Okay,
So it ends up people feeling like they're being singled out because these properties are not developed. Those ones are, so they don't get.
Which, now I can't see the lot lines, like I see towards the top, it looks like the island's split in half, but then,
These goes all the way across.
so these go all the way across.
Yeah.
And so,
right, but take a look at the south side.
okay,
Now, there are 3 houses on the south side. They are probably within 500 feet of each other. And that guy, it's a single lot. I want to build a 4th house And why can't I build a fourth house when there's already 3 within 500 feet, which exceeds the density on my property? Now, I understand it really depends on how you define an area in your definition of built-up,
Developed.
developed. If you say the area is any area you pick and not a lot line and not a lot, that whole area extends more than 1,000 feet, but the south side looks pretty built up with 3 houses already.
There's
mean,
only two
wouldn't
houses.
density
The
or-
one that's in the green isn't a house.
Well,
Okay.
it's still within 500 feet, so anywhere along that curve at the bottom is within 500 feet, let's say, let's assume, of the 2 that are houses.
You're looking at the frontage. I mean, this is like the perfect, like a difficult example where you're on a peninsula. And the frontage, basically, I mean, you have to, on this one, I would interpret that as, instead of using shore frontage, kind of just go along the outside, and look at the frontage there and what's developable. And you also get into the density. Is a fourth house even allowed on that lot? How does RP change anything?
Well, let's say they subdivided that into 2 lots, which they can do without getting approval.
Well, they would need to meet shoreline zoning requirements. I don't know, what the lot size is, what the shore frontage is. There's a lot of things that go, I mean, they do need to not create a lot that isn't in compliance with the law. They can't make a new non-conforming lot. It gets complicated if you got 3 structures on it, because now you're like, when were the structures built? Were they predating shoreland zoning? If so, there's rules of construction for trying to break that lot apart. You try and make each lot more non-conforming, or more conforming, most conforming possible. So, I mean, this is a really tough example of, I want to break off another lot. There's a lot more than just whether or not we're calling this RP or limited residential. Even if you call it limited residential, there's still a lot of questions.
Limited residential is our shoreland residential.
Right,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
right.
Thank you.
And that's what it was before. The whole island was shoreline residential. And I think we're sort of singling out some of the shoreline residential zones and throwing them in RP, when in reality, the majority of our shorefront is in the CF zone, which doesn't have that as an issue. When you look at the map, it's all pink.
Like if Judy was to zoom out. A lot, not that far. Just you'll see a lot around Pole Island there is all pink, which is commercial fishing.
And so when we go to the voters and we all of a sudden have, how many properties at the last count, 500 properties
I really can't remember.
that are new to RP, we're going to have a lot of unhappy people. And they're going to want to know.
That's going to happen. That's got to happen. I mean, the town of Harpswell had incorrectly mapped RP. This is part of the growing pain of actually catching up. Had you had the proper RP to begin with, there wouldn't be 500 people all of a sudden. And I'm sorry to, kind of be that guy, but that's kind of the way it is. I mean, you weren't in compliance to begin with, so yes, this is going to be a big step, but it's required by law.
No, and I understand that.
And the currently developed is a break. It's like, okay, you're out. I understand that people aren't going to be happy, but that's the law, and there's good reason to not have people developing these areas as a town, as a municipality, big picture wise.
So I
I mean,
guess,
another way to look at it is applying the rules that have existed all along.
well, but that's what I wanted to, that's the point I
Now we're
wanted.
applying to the folks that should have been covered
We
years ago.
said that, but nobody was satisfied with that answer.
But let me just make the point that I wanted to make, was that definition of built up that you have provided, that the DEP has said is the one we should use, the 500 and 100, is not codified anywhere.
Nope.
That's my problem, is that you guys are coming up with a rule, not you particularly, but the DEP saying you should use this rule. It's very difficult to understand what the area is that you're talking when you look at each area. My concern is twofold. One, that we're going to get challenges. And it isn't just going to be a bunch of angry people. It's going to be people that have the wherewithal to contest that. And we have to stand up for it, and that costs the town money. And I would hesitate to recommend to the select board that they, do something that's going to cost them a lot of dough because they can't support it. When you take away someone's right to build a house on their land, you darn about well better be right. I mean, that's all I'm asking for, is how do we define this so that people can understand it, the 500 and the 100 test.
I did lay out a different test, but I want to go right back to something you just said. We're not taking their land.
No,
We're
you're taking
changing,
the-
if it was LR and now it's RP, there's nothing on it, they can still build on it. There's different restrictions.
Yeah, but
If you have this,
there's a
you have
limit on-
special exception in for the RP?
With the 1,500 square feet.
Yeah, it's 1,500 square feet, which doesn't help a lot of people when they're building mega mansions.
But isn't it also, if this is my lot, half of it's in RP and half of it's not.
Kind of like the south, the
Your
south
whole
lot on
thing
Pole
has to be
Island.
If
For you guys to grant the 1,500.
look at how far the RP zone comes in, though.
That's my point.
It's not 75 feet. That's not 75 feet. This is a big island.
Yeah,
And I'll show you the same thing at the tip of Dixon Point in Lowell's Cove.
So this
Same
is,
thing.
what's the depth on that? What is the depth from, approximately, what
This
are we
is
talking?
about 190.
Okay, so
This is
it's
where
all
the-
within the
that's where
shoreline
That's where
zone.
the floodplain goes.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's all within, we're not talking 500
Somebody wants
feet.
to sue to build in the floodplain.
Yeah.
Well, that would have different issues.
right.
But that's what I guess,
mean,
that's
so-
what the RP is. It's the floodplain, or it's a
Exactly.
20% slope.
Exactly. I think Howard's right, and Jeff is right too. The way that we explain this is going to be really critical, and I think it's going to take some serious background work. Educate landowners about why this is happening, because they're going to see it as a deleterious change for them. But there are reasons, as Jeff said, that are not only protect the property owner, but protect the water quality for the marine environment. And so we have to be able to explain that. The other thing that Howard said, which I am fully in agreement with, is if I can't explain why these changes are happening as a planning board person, then I'm going to be loath to go up in front of a town meeting and ask folks to support it. And right now, I don't feel like I can explain it very
That's really what happened last time, too.
well.
And the change in our definition isn't gonna make that simpler.
I think it is definitely simpler. I
I don't
just,
know how many it'll take out, how many more houses you'll be able to take out, but it seems, more understandable. And maybe you need time to think about, or,
so here's a question. Could we satisfy your rules, like, say, instead of putting the 20% slope in resource protection, could we just write in our ordinance that you can't build on slopes that are 20%? So we can avoid zoning at RP and just make an ordinance change?
are you talking about RP, a slope throughout the whole 250, or are you talking about a slope that's, 100 feet? I mean, what it comes down, what a lot of is what I've seen on slopes, Like, what a lot comes down to is they're not able to do the point system out front. They want to clear for the view, for the openness, to get air flowing, for whatever reasons they want to clear for. It really doesn't, I mean, unless it's for the whole 250, and then it can limit the size of what they're building. And it limits the cleared openings in back, which can be beneficial because if you got great big huge cleared openings, you got a lot of stormwater going down a steep slope, which usually
Right.
isn't a
Yeah.
good combination. So,
I just feel
I mean,
like
I don't know, you could do that across the board. I mean, what was that again?
people don't want their property zone resource protection. But if you say, Sam Alexander is a perfect example. You say, Sam says, I don't want that to be resource protection. And you say, well, do you want to build on your 20% slope? Well, no, I'm never going to build on it. So my thought was like, maybe there's a different way that we could regulate it without people feeling like their rights are being taken from them. Because they don't want to build on the steep slopes, but they also don't want to be zoned resource protection.
That's not really transparent, though.
No,
And you are Miss Transparency, so.
no, it's not transparent. I just thought maybe it was a
And
viable
it
solution.
doesn't, isn't the map a legal document? So Map
Yeah.
has to match what is true in the written document.
Yeah.
I-
The
yeah, I
answer is
get-
no.
No.
I get the
I
answer.
understand Jeff's point about clearing trees because there's very limited tree clearing that you can do in the RP zone.
I almost feel, from a public policy standpoint, that we are going to have to bite the bullet on this. It isn't going to be one public hearing. It's going to be a whole education program that we're going to have to think through. It's going to require mailing to everybody, a really good explanation in the mailing, good online website documentation, and then a series of public hearings, probably, not public, but workshops or meetings on a neighborhood level.
Totally.
And I think we need to start planning that out.
Mm-hmm.
So Jeff, you have this new rule written down, correct? The one that you
Yeah.
were, do we have that?
Probably not. I didn't really email anything out prior to this
Okay.
meeting.
It would be great to have that and also have a bunch of examples. If, for example, you have this and this, then it's this. If your situation is this, to give people, sometimes the ordinance or the rule by itself seems very complex to understand. But I'm thinking about real life examples, and I think we will have to have that if we do it. I need it myself.
Yeah, well, I think
But for
ideally you
just
would
education.
ask questions about something in Harpswell.
Right.
Is what happens in Phippsburg. I mean, what's going on in Harpswell? I mean, where is the board? Getting stuck? Where are people asking a lot of questions and things like that? See, I talked with Margaret, mostly emailed with Margaret. You guys worked on things and then came up with a map and had a very hard time with it. And I kind of missed all that in the middle. And I'd like to be involved in the middle. As we work through this, we develop examples in Harpswell for your planning board meeting. This is why we did this on that lot. I mean, I need more time with the peninsula one, the Dow Island. I mean, there's a lot there. And RP might not change a thing. What they can actually do with that lot, except maybe some clearing. I mean, I don't know how they got 3 on there now, but.
They did it in 19.
Okay, well, that's perfect, yeah, so great, so they're grandfathered, and, he might be able to do some splits, but splitting out an undeveloped lot might be tough, whether there's RP or not.
I'm property on
Oh.
president of the homeowners association.
Oh, cool,
Oh, so you know a lot about what.
So, yeah, I know a lot about it.
yeah,
Southern tip, a lot of that is flood
yeah,
area. That's more understandable. Regardless of how the rules.
right up here. There's a lot here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, big lot, okay.
That's the steep slopes on the island.
Okay.
So there's a big question.
It looked like there were
These
steep
two
slopes on the other
houses are more than
side.
500 feet apart.
Yeah, I mean, can you put the slope data back up again? So the red is 20%?
Yep.
Now, how did you determine that it was contiguous or not? Because the whole right side seems like it's more than 2 acres.
Oh, this is only the contiguous. The red is just the contiguous, anything that's contiguous, 20-acre slopes. It
Okay,
just
so
didn't-
then when you mapped it, why isn't it on both sides of the island? Because that side should be green then.
Because the houses are there, so it just got taken out for limited
Gotcha.
residential.
All right, and so that
And it
sharp
just got-
line is the lot line.
It's not the lot line. It got cut here because we weren't using that same calculation. We were just trying to estimate, 500 feet apart for houses and, where there was continuous houses and then there's no houses anymore on this side.
Yeah.
So we cut it past that house. That was the logic I used.
Right, so
It can change, it could go down to that lot line. I mean, we didn't have we were trying our best to,
Yeah.
to keep the slopes where there was no further housing for some length of time, some length of distance of shoreline that was more than 500 feet. So anywhere there was more than 500 feet of shoreline with no house and not another house like right on the other edge of it, we kept the RP in. It doesn't? Okay.
500 feet from that house.
No, I wasn't, I wasn't buffering the house by 500 feet. I was looking for another house within 500 feet.
So
There's no other house within 500 feet.
Then we moved the RP to a reasonable distance from the house. There's no other.
It should have been the lot line. I might not have been clear on that.
Yeah.
So if that's the line, it should be adjusted to wherever the lot line is. Because if that parcel's within 500, or that dwelling's within 500 feet of another dwelling, we just the whole parcel. You can't map.
Middle of the
It's set up by parcels, roads, other major divisions. So that was probably information I didn't provide. But that would explain why there's a straight line and not, most of that island's not getting RP. It seems like most of the lots on there already have a dwelling, so I don't know they could get a second. Anyways, I'm not really sure from a practical standpoint
where is the lot line?
what it means.
Right where Jim's cursor is.
Right there.
And each lot is a little over 5 acres.
So why didn't the RP go to the lot line? 'Cause the answer was,
I probably didn't explain it well. I mean, this is the first time Judy and I have met, talked about this project. Again, I
because in the middle, we were trying to craft a rule that the area would start at a lot and end at a lot line.
Oh.
And we were told we couldn't do that by our,
The attorney
Attorney.
did not agree with that idea, no. So the next lot down,
Well,
if
then
we
how
go by your
do you determine
The
where you
area.
draw the line?
I don't know.
exactly.
That's a good question.
So the next lot down, where it says
I
Pole
lost that
Island
now.
on there's a house, but on the other side of the island, there's RP. Are you saying that if there's one principal structure on the lot, none of the lot goes into RP? Is that what you're saying?
So in the interesting experience of Harpswell, where you have ridges and, two sides of something and a house on one side of that,
Yeah.
and then the other side, if you
It's
do the
steep.
whole lot, then the other side wouldn't go into RP.
Which other side?
Just this, so
So this
if
pole,
this whole lot can't have any RP on it, even though there's a house on this side, then that leaves open this to be divided. And someone to be able to put a house on this side and there'd be no RP
Well,
on
what's
that
the
side.
5-lot restriction? Is that like an association restriction? Is it a
Yeah.
municipal restriction? I mean, how many dwellings are allowed on
It
a
was
5-acre?
subdivided.
Mhm.
But,
Yeah, if you could email me that. This is a good one. I mean, we normally, I'm dealing with, well, not normally, but frequently, we're looking at small lots. Might not even like have dimensional requirements, they're just grandfathered. This is a somewhat unique situation with an island and large lots that, you know, may be able to be subdivided and a house put on the other shore, if, you know, maybe even two, depending on the dimensions.
I feel like if we could explain this, we could explain anything.
Yeah, if you can send
Well,
me
but I
that.
don't think this is unusual in Harpswell for the islands.
No.
Oh, no, that's a
Well,
good
it's the
example,
same way.
yeah.
We just have a ton of steep slopes too. You know, Judy took out all the developed steep slopes because it was going to put thousands of people or something
Yeah.
crazy like that into RP.
But there's also still a lot of large lots. I mean, this one is a bad example because Bowden owns it. But, you know, here's a lot where there's a development, you know, there's some buildings here. But then if this whole lot goes out of RP, then all the rest of that shoreline that has nothing on it goes out of RP.
I mean, that begs the question for me, what is the purpose of what the DEP, what is the goal of DEP to meet with this language? What's it trying to do?
Not have development in floodplains or steep slopes, which, you know, can be very detrimental to water quality.
So I get that, that's what I figured, but it sounds like what Judy just said is actually not meeting that goal.
Now where your lots are that large, I mean,
Here's one
you know,
of these.
you know, my first kind of reaction is that we might have to limit that. You're right, because all of a sudden you could have, let's say, 10 lots on there.
Yeah.
And it was all removed. So maybe we have to, when we say lots, I think we're gonna have to just, refine that.
Well, see,
Because I'm not usually dealing with lots that big.
And we don't have a ton of lots that big either. But
Well, it still needs to be resolved. This is
Yeah.
we
what
do.
we need to resolve
There's
for
quite a
when
few.
you're at the
We do.
meeting.
Look
Birch
at the
Island
look
has
at the
a
map.
lot. I mean,
yeah, that one on Birch Island, I think, is
White
protected.
Island. I mean,
but-
there's a
yeah.
there's a fair. I mean, just having looked
That
at
one's
every
a
single
little
parcel in Harpswell many times over.
Yeah.
There's more than its fair share than there are in a lot of the other towns that I've done shoreline zoning in.
Yeah, well, when Margaret
It's
asked
way
for,
more complicated than any other town I've done.
What's the
shoreline
lady that
zoning in.
owns?
when you asked for an example, I just did a real simple one. It's like there's a bunch of houses
owns
here, and then
a lot
there
of
wasn't a
big
bunch of
lots.
houses there.
So I have
woman
two,
that
Oh,
owns-
two,
Helen Norton.
yeah.
Those are huge lots on the neck.
So really, the question is what happens when
Look at these lots.
the lot is large and can be subdivided? Is that kind of the fundamental question?
I think that's,
Huge lots.
I don't think that's a fundamental question, but I think that's one question. I do have a question though, Jeff. Were these resource protection rules originally developed for freshwater wetlands? Because I feel like they don't really capture the issues that we have for coastal wetlands, like the steep slopes, the floodplains. I just feel like it's really hard to apply them to the town of Harpswell.
I couldn't say how they were developed. I mean, that's all 70s and 80s.
But you don't know that they were originally for like ponds and lakes and rivers? That's how it
When I
feels a
look
little
back
bit.
at the old chapter 1000s into the 70s and 80s, it's pretty much freshwater and coastal.
Oh.
Um,
And
They were looking at both at the time, and whether or not it works or makes sense is more of a legislative question
Yeah.
than it is kind of like there's only so much I can do, and I'm doing it now to try and
Yeah,
make it work
totally.
as best possible. And apparently there's been resistance for this for quite some time. And why doesn't it work? Why doesn't this work for Harpswell? RP, not just forget about our discussion of currently developed. Why didn't it work?
I just feel like because we're coming up with a bunch of little tiny slivers of land, especially with the steep slopes. Like, look at all those little slivers that are now in RP. And that is really hard for homeowners to understand and for us to try to explain to them.
So what are we talking? Those are like those little slivers or 2 acres of contiguous slopes of
Yeah.
20%
That are within the shoreline
and
zone.
they're not developed.
Right.
And and they seem to be not very deep, 100 feet deep, 200 feet deep. It's hard for me to gauge the depth of some of those slivers.
How wide they are?
How wide they are, yeah, from, if you'd measure
they're not
from,
85 feet.
seems odd to me that you have, usually I see it on the shore and then I don't,
This is what the pattern.
what's
is.
the middle one?
It's
What's it called?
there's a ridge here,
Ridge.
but it's not, it's not 20% up once it gets up here, but it's there and there.
Yeah.
That's where they wanted to put the portable, attainable house.
This is, so I use the LiDAR data. I use the LiDAR data.
No.
And I made it into 3-foot pixels and then calculated the slope for each pixel and then.
So a lot of them, are you seeing less than 75 feet? These,
The width,
yeah, the width
yeah.
of what the remnant, once you've subtracted everything based on currently developed, and you're leaving little slivers,
well-
you called them. What are these slivers? What are the depth of the slivers from the water? Are they like on a single lot? Are they?
Well, this one, it goes across, but that's just because the shoreline zoning, the coast goes out. I mean,
Yeah.
the actual 20% slope continues along
Mhm.
this ridge.
But they're outside the shoreline
Yeah,
zone.
and this little piece here comes along this side of the ridge. It's the only piece that shows up in shoreline.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't tons of those. I mean, it does look a little weird, like on these
So
sides.
let's go back to where you were.
Yep,
And some of those ones right on the coast.
yep.
What are we looking at there for like dimension wise? Like how many feet of shore frontage? What's their kind of depth?
So from the parcel line, like 32 feet.
They're 32 feet deep.
There's a lot of steep slope on our coastline. There
Yeah.
just is. And
That slope follows along.
So they're not 75 basically. There's most
No.
of that
They
is
don't
less
go
than
all the way
75.
And that's true, I would say, a goodly chunk of,
So a lot of that area is, oops, sorry.
is restricted.
And you have all the cutting restrictions would apply, right? The point system and everything. That might be something we can.
What came up that I remember at the meeting was one woman who stood up and said, there's a row of lots. This one has a house, this one has a house, this one has a house, mine doesn't have a house. And now you're telling me I can't build on it. And that's the kind of thing we need to be able to explain.
we
We
where's
understand if it's law, we get that. But people are still going to be unhappy and need to understand. We can understand.
Yeah, no, it's tough. That's zoning. That's like as times change, the zone changes, things change, and what you could have. Just the other week before the law went into effect, you can't have the person next door can't have that.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of comes along with the deal. Yeah, their grandfather. That's kind of grandfathering, and that can be a tough thing to swallow. But we're not taking this one lot that's left. It just has more restrictions. We're allowing them to build on it. It might not be the big place they had dreamed about their whole life when they retired, but that's just how the law works. I mean, I
But
can't change that.
To Courtney's point, it seems like we're being asked to meet a deadline, we being the town, to meet a deadline that has been imposed at several layers of government. But we don't have an adequate understanding of how the rules apply in Harpswell. And we don't even really have an adequate understanding of how they should apply in Harpswell. And I find that very disconcerting because we just cannot risk, I don't think, undermining public support for this, public understanding for this. We will undermine our credibility as a local government and as a planning board if we can't really explain this, justify it, and back it up. And I feel like we're caught in a vise because we have a deadline that we're supposed to meet without adequate understanding. And that is, I'm not prepared as a planning board as a chair, to recommend to the board that we move forward on this because we just destroy our credibility. And
Yeah, well, we're working on that now. I mean, there's some things like this last question we had, there, the last lot standing or remaining undeveloped, has all these restrictions nobody else had. I mean, doesn't matter what kind of zoning you're talking about. I mean, you could
My
change
head is a
something.
great
Yeah,
example.
I'm trying to
Yeah,
remember,
I
I don't
read
remember
that.
where this woman was from. I just remember
was
her
from
standing
Birch
up and she was very
Island or-
frustrated, understandably so.
She might have been from. That is a great example. That's sold, but it's just kind of a similar example now there.
Well, what are you gonna do when they come to you? You're gonna tell them they can only build a 1,500
if-
square foot house?
Technically,
Well,
but also there's restrictions about building. That there are, the flood ordinance has restrictions on what you can and can't build.
That wasn't
And, you know,
shared.
just from a practical standpoint,
Right.
there's a reason that that's the
But they may have
last
to build
undeveloped
up.
lot. The reason is that it's not, it's not as marketable as the other lots.
That's what we're seeing a lot of, is a lot of land that nobody would have ever thought of developing before is
Yeah.
being developed.
Judy,
All
will
the-
you put the
all the
flood
wet
zone on
stuff
there?
is,
Now it doesn't matter. You want,
Gotta have it all.
I know, exactly.
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 But all the other houses are in the flood zone too, I assume.
No.
No, just.
Not just
big
a low
block there.
spot.
I mean, just because it's a lot on a map doesn't mean that all land is not created equal. And that's a really hard concept for folks that own a piece of property that want to do something on it, especially if they could have a day ago, but now are being told they can't.
Yeah.
It just puts us in a really awkward position.
But as
Well,
of,
there's two different types on the screen.
as of today, that's not in resource protection.
By definition, it
It
is.
is, it is.
It's
It
just not
hasn't been
mapped.
If it's not mapped, it's not.
No,
Has to be
it's
shown.
I mean, by definition, our
If it
definition.
has to be shown on the map. Pretty sure your ordinance is gonna say as showing
Yeah,
on,
we
as
don't,
showing,
it's not,
as shown on the.
if she
map.
pulls a permit before we do this change, she wins.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And you have to give her the.
not
you
on-
have to
if
give
it's
her the
not-
Permit.
So when
See,
is
I
her
thought that
deadline?
if it said resource protection by definition, it was in it. Because we have the definition, our ordinance says what's in resource protection, so
I
we
think you're
go.
referring to the section that says it's not exact, and you can, if it's not on the map, where is that section?
It does say that the flood zone is not mapped.
Interpretation of district boundaries, but that one. Is the depiction of the RP district and all shoreline districts on the maps is illustrative of their general location. The boundaries shall be determined but by measurement from maximum high water line. Yeah, so you could make the argument that
Good.
even if it doesn't show on the map, you have to do that, but
But
No,
also,
not shoreline zoning, it's section 11.1, official shoreline zoning map. The areas to which this ordinance is applicable are hereby divided into the following districts as shown on the official shoreland zoning map, which are made part of this ordinance. So if it's not on the map,
Right.
Except the flood zone. 'Cause
But
I
then
think
we-
what
it's
is it
underneath
mapped
that.
as now? It's mapped as LR,
But then we have
or limited shoreland.
But it does say, the most recent version of the flood insurance rate map prepared by FEMA is considered to be part of the official shoreland zoning map for the purpose of identifying the resource protection district adjacent to tidal waters. So there
Got me
is,
there, it's a Harpswellism.
yeah, and then on the next page, section 13.1, number 2, it does say, for the flood zone, whether or not these areas are depicted on the official shoreland zoning map. So at least for the flood zone, it's in RP regardless of whether or not it's actually mapped. The rest of them are
Yeah, I
not.
think that, I
Just the
think-
flood zone.
Yeah, I think you could be challenged on that. Because, I mean, the department's interpretation has been strictly on the
Yeah.
map, but,
It's remarkable to me that nobody's ever come to the Board of Appeals in the last 25 years.
Really?
With an argument about where the boundary is. That's one of
Yeah.
our duties, is to
That's
determine
correct.
boundaries.
That's correct.
We haven't updated it
State
since
documents.
2013, though.
Kind of
You
in
know-
our last conversation, website. Caption there, says something about that the town's ordinances are more specific, state's ordinances. Not prevail.
I think there's a legal case here.
Yeah.
And, you know, Margaret may very well win it. I mean, I can see her point. I mean, but I don't know. I mean, we're talking court, so.
Well, they have to go to appeals board first.
So,
Then they come to us.
Jeff, have other people come up with, I know that we're not supposed to compare ourselves to other towns and what they're going through, but have other towns come up with maps that look like ours, that have like little areas and stuff in the RP? Because
What I see more is like if you have like a slope on the coast, and it's a small slope, usually it'll be like 100, 125 feet in, and it'll like run for a long distance over several properties. This, what you showed there, where you've got these little, like, the actual shoreline does, but once you take away everything that we've talked about taking away, what we're left with is these little things. I think that will not be a problem to resolve as long as you've got the cutting standards, the slope standard, the point system and all of that, and because at that point, there's really, because everything outside of there is going to be shoreland, just your shoreland zone. So having that little sliver of 75 feet for 25 feet just doesn't make
Can't
any
build
sense.
there anyway.
You can't build there, you've got a point system, they're not gonna be clear cutting it. I don't see that as a problem.
I think some of the issue is the data. I think previously, when we were, at least the last round of shoreline zoning maps that I did 20 years ago, were being done by using 10-foot contours from USGS maps. So people were guesstimating 20-foot slopes and how much contiguousness there was of those. LiDAR data gives us a whole nother
Yeah, that's
round
awesome.
of detail that we didn't have before. So one, I suspect that all the towns that I'm doing now, I'm doing the same thing for, so they're gonna get more of these thinner areas because we can identify where the 20% contiguous slopes are now that we couldn't identify before.
that'd
In
be
much
good.
more detail than we could before. So that is gonna start showing up in places. And I'm doing it for at least 5 towns right now.
Are you really?
Yeah,
Have they asked for similar things that we asked for?
Yeah.
Oh.
yes, but they're not as complicated.
And have for those towns, has it been a while since they've done their map? Or is this like something kind of like us, it's been a while?
Well, I think, at some point, you had said that there was another way of looking at the 500 and 100 that sort of focused on lots as well. Another definition of
Well,
that.
it's dwellings, okay? What I had sent before, I'll read it, even though we'll probably just confuse everything. structure per, which have fewer than one principal structure per 500 feet of shoreland or frontage for areas that extend more than 1,000 feet.
Yeah, we have that.
Yeah. So what
That doesn't-
what I'm coming with today is if there are two structures, principal structures, within 500 feet, the area can stay LR. So you look at the
Right.
structures, and if there's
Right.
structures.
Why don't you say that again so I can write that one down? If
2 principal structures
are
Perf.
2 principal structures,
within 500 feet of each
Within-
other,
500 feet
it would be considered developed.
other,
Currently developed.
And how does that extend
That's right. That's my
either
question.
side of those two structures?
Okay, let's say we've got the two structures, okay? And that's it? Those two lots are out of
So it's called a
RP.
lot boundary?
Yeah, you'd have to go by the lot
The
boundary.
lot boundaries of the structures
Yes.
are,
Would not.
Would be, because that's how you have to do your
That's
math.
a good example.
Otherwise, you could probably come up with a different rule, but I think using lot lines is a lot cleaner. But it might be tough on some of these examples that on, I forget the name of the island, where you've got 5-acre lots that are going to be subdividable in a few years. There's, generally speaking, not that much shoreland available in southern Maine. This is going to be huge.
but if we don't go by the lot lines, what we saw happening is that it's just a creep down.
Exactly.
And because you build one house and it's okay, and then the next house gets built because it's within 500 feet of the first house. And so that the continual RP mapping is the next time we go mapping.
If you've got, okay, so let's start from the very beginning. You've got this lot, this is a built lot.
Yep.
And it is or isn't an RP?
It's not right now.
It's not right now, okay. And then somebody builds next door
Yeah,
on this lot.
right,
So what's changing? It's just shoreland right now.
right.
And
Neither
they
of them
build
are
within
in,
500 feet here, and then
but it's
somebody,
continually eating up.
Okay,
1,000
so we're
feet.
starting with, this is an RP, and then somebody comes in and builds on this lot,
Right.
and it's not RP. And so
Right.
then that you're saying that this would convert to shoreland. That's the, yeah, okay.
And the other
Wait,
thing
which
is,
one did you convert to shoreland? I thought one was
The
an
second
RP. and the
Well, if this was RP, then the one next to it was an RP, then they built
It gets
something within
developed.
500 feet of this, then this is no longer in limited resident, no, in
RP.
RP.
right. And the next time we
that's the
map, we
crux
have
of
to
the
take it
issue
out.
right there.
Well, and what's even worse, I think, is that we have the 1,500 square feet limitation in RP. So someone builds one of those,
Then it's developed.
then it's developed. We have to take that one out.
No,
They can
no,
expand.
that one doesn't come out. That stays,
Where does it say?
putting the whole, like, currently developed.
It's-
That would stay. It would be getting developed under the RP standards. It's not changing it. it
Even
would
though it's a
stay.
principal structure?
It's a principal structure. And that would, I mean, it's on a lot. But I see what, I'm beginning to understand. I struggled with that last time.
Yeah, I
I'm
was
beginning
trying
to
to- we didn't
understand, but if it was, RP, and they built a 1,500 special exception, somebody comes in, the question is what happens if somebody comes in next door and then all of a sudden they're within 500 feet?
And how your neighbor can have that much, your neighbor's building can have that much of an impact on your property.
And we
That-
have a lot of areas that are built up, like Lowell's Cove, for example, but there are lots that are next to it, like Dixon Point.
Yeah, I'm thinking we might
It
need
just
to
creeps right around it.
come up with a density, like an existing density, something more than just 500 feet. Maybe that's too simple.
Our attorney
'Cause
or.
the intent is these highly developed areas, not large empty lots that, I mean,
Right.
I think we have to think about that. But you have areas in town where you've a lot of development, they're all basically undersized or just right-sized lots, and all of a sudden you're gonna try and put the RP on them. That's where we're trying to avoid it.
Yeah.
We're not trying to avoid it in these large lots, we're not trying to
You're trying to avoid
play these
here,
games.
Yeah, no,
Not here where these lots are big and they go all the way.
Yeah, so I think that's something that,
Which is-
yeah,
that's
we're gonna have to take a look at.
I mean, that's the other thing about Harpswell that's interesting is that there's the road along the middle of the, whatever peninsula it is, anywhere along in the town, and then all the lots go
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah.
You know,
So
so there are most of the lot is out of the shoreland zone.
when we were working with AGA, she suggested instead of using your definition of developed, we pick areas in town which are currently developed and just and use those as an exemption, kind of carve them out. And that was her suggestion. She did not like your definition of developed at all. So that's just, another approach, I guess, that we.
Did she put that in writing?
No.
Or do you
No,
have-
it was
do you
at a
have anything-
workshop.
Do you have
She's a lawyer.
well, I've worked with AGA, I respect AGA.
Yeah, she's great, but.
No, she's been doing this a lot longer than me.
Yeah, she just thought, this definition was problematic, and she thought the idea was more to carve out some areas that are already developed, so you're not making new non-conforming conditions, and then everything else, would. But then we have to decide what areas counts as developed, and that seemed like could be just as political of an issue.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that should be a DP
Yeah.
kind of thing. I haven't dealt with this a lot. Like I said, it's been the FEMA maps, and this is the first situation where I've seen all of these variables.
Well,
Come
you
in
see, we
mind.
have a problem. Yeah, no, we do. We have a problem because apparently we're already in arrears for complying with this. I wonder, for fairness purposes, if this could be put in a way we could explain to people and then have an extension for implementing it so that the person who has the one house now is an RP and nobody else is, because the houses were there, does she get to put her house there and go under the current situation without, because we're not giving them any notice. We can't even explain this ourselves.
Oh, you have to give legal notice if you're putting somebody's property in.
I'm just,
Can I-
this is just a fairness thing, that's all, that's all I'm saying.
What I would really like to see is a memo from, whether you folks put it together with Judy, whether Margaret and Judy and Jeff put it together, a memo really summarizing the issues that we have discussed today, the problems and unanswered questions, what DEP is going to be working on specifically, resolve with regard to these unanswered. And as Courtney just suggested, some kind of official statement that says, given the complexities that Harpswell has, we will extend your deadline for so many months, or because we can't go to the town, given what the DEP, the unresolved issues that we can't answer. It just doesn't make any sense for us to move ahead and spend town money on further mapping and more meetings when we don't really have the answers. It's expensive for the town, and we can't do it. It's expensive in terms of our credibility, in terms of the dollar amount, and in terms of the time that people are
Well, Judy, can we do this on a lot line basis? Though? Is that possible for you to do this?
Tells me to do.
But I mean, you have we have the GIS capability of doing it on a lot line. I think what you're gonna find is that if we do it on a lot line basis using the definition that Jeff has just given us, that it's going to reduce the number of new properties. Except, and we could then explain it by virtue of the fact that the floodplain mapping is much more precise, and the mapping with respect to the 20% slope is much more precise that we have. And that gives us the justification of that. And whoever I think we need to see what that happened, and I think Judy needs to obviously work with Christie to come up with a budget to do this.
Are you saying only vacant lots that meet the criteria would have resource protection zoning?
But I think that if there's two houses within 500 feet, they're gonna get excluded as developed. I think we keep the developed one, because a lot of the area that we have is developed. But it's gonna show up on the big lots, which is what we wanna have. And the thin strips don't bother me as much, because as long as they can build, upland, that's not a problem. It shouldn't be doesn't affect their value.
It'll be a problem for Tim. I mean, 'cause somebody's gonna go in there and cut, and the neighbor's gonna say, well, that's RP.
Yeah,
So I think that's a simple, I don't see that as being
I don't see it as
problematic. I think we can get rid of those. To be quite honest with you, I think that the way DEP is approaching this is pretty broad. I mean, if we just start looking at areas that, you'd have identified as, there's a lot of houses there, I don't know how many, 10 per acre, let's say, just, so it's a really just only apply this to dense areas, that whole island's gonna be RP.
Right,
Look at
totally.
this.
So this is a good deal,
Show 'em.
but we can look at, we're not making deals, but, we can.
Because I know you can't.
We want to
everybody
do
can see
the right
this, but
thing, Jeff. We're just looking
Yeah.
for the
As you
way-
zoom out, you can pretty much see where the density is.
Yeah,
But then you come over here, and that's where it gets different. The neck is the worst, by the way. But there are sections of Orange that have the same thing, but it sort of pops out to you where the houses are.
I mean, what's in the town's comprehensive plan? I mean, does the town want that island
Oh, that's the
developed?
source of it.
I mean, what's your plan? What's your big plan here?
We're right in the middle of adopting a new comprehensive plan.
Yeah, because some municipalities want that development. They want their coast
We're looking at putting houses
developed.
on 8,000 square feet, but let's not go there.
Sorry, but I'm just saying you have to also kind of bring
There
in
weren't
the future.
there weren't significant, I mean, our last comprehensive plan was 2005.
Yes.
The people that were doing the comprehensive plan pretty much left the shoreline zone the way it is, and we were focusing our efforts on the inland zone. We have two buildable real zones, zoning restrictions.
So what's happening with the shoreline zone this time around?
Not much, minor
Yeah,
changes.
not much.
So you're basically retaining.
Yes.
The
yes.
same districts.
Yeah. The goals to protect the shoreline are definitely still there. In fact, I'm not even going to bring it up.
Yeah, listen,
I think that the environmental protection goals are still there for the shoreline. Definitely still there. The main question that we'll have to deal with as a town, there's a lot of area that's in commercial fishing that got put there that needs to be really taken a new look at and confirmed or just tweaked a little bit. Sam Alexander.
Chondros Point is my favorite.
Pardon me?
Chondros Point, it's
Yeah.
been zoned commercial fishing since we adopted shoreline zoning, and there's not 1 ounce of commercial fishing on that whole peninsula.
well, we can have that
Yeah.
almost in all the commercial fishing areas
But,
are already.
but my goal is to get this policy figured out,
Yes.
so that we can then go and look at the existing zoning of the rest of the lots in town, and then we can apply this resource protection policy as needed. If we take Tondros Point out, for example, Tondros Point out of commercial fishing, will any of it end up in RP? But first, we need to figure out what our RP looks like. That's what I think.
Let me ask you another question from a policy standpoint. Why the exclusion for development? What's the policy behind that? If you put the tests of the floodplain and the 20% slope and just apply it to every property and say, that's in RP, you got an existing house, it's grandfathered. but nobody's gonna tear it down anymore. Except to build a 1,500 square foot house, which they aren't gonna do.
Well,
That
I mean,
happened-
if
that
it's
actually would help
grandfathered,
us.
you would have that footprint. I mean, you could build,
Yeah, the
you could replace it. I think, you know, it's a bit of, you're trying to address the fairness question that's brought up. It's like, all of a sudden, you know, it's RP, they've been living there since forever, and they can't cut any more trees. Because you can only cut hazards, basically. So that's usually a problem. Vegetated, cleared vegetated,
Existing,
you can maintain existing,
you
but
can continue to do what you've been doing.
not necessarily. If you can maintain existing cleared openings, but you can't go down and cut saplings anymore, or, you know, just maintain 5 saplings. I mean, it changes what you can do. It changes, if you want a garage, maybe, you know, the cleared opening part of it changes, the cutting standards change, the non-vegetated surfaces change. I mean, you may not see these as huge changes, but some people do. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I've been on properties with having these discussions, so I get both sides of it.
Yeah, I do too. I think the goal is really to protect the common good. That's really what the goal is. And to do that while allowing maximum flexibility. Which is what you have to do, and it's a complete balancing act.
Yeah, and I think the biggest question for me today so far is the, you know, the big lots. What are we going to do with the big lots? What is DEP's policy really doesn't address that well. It doesn't address the, you know, I mean, they're getting you know, a lot out of RP because they have a house on a 5-acre lot that has 2 shore frontages.
So I think for the record, I would ask that we have a memo that summarizes this meeting. So it's on the record, what we've talked about, what the questions were that remain unresolved, what the questions were that have been resolved, and where we go from here. I would like to see that for the public.
I just don't know where we go from here.
I was about to ask that.
That's the question that
Well,
I
I
came into
think
this meeting with.
it's the ball's in DEP's court. Okay, I've got to come back with, you know, if you can send me a couple examples of the big lots. And I've got to come back with an answer on, you know, how we're approaching that. And see also if there's a better way to get at the density that we all seem to agree is what we're really after. Again, recognizing that first island may become all RP if we adopt something where you have posted size lots as the density standard. I mean, and the municipality could do that all on their own, but it'd probably be better if it came from DEP.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, then they're gonna say, oh, you just made it RP. I can't build, or I have to do restrictions, or I have to do this or that. Well, you just ruined my value of my lot. How do we do that with the assessor? He just took a $100,000 lot, and now I can't build on it, so now it's worth $25,000. There goes our tax base.
Well, I can't build a big house. I can build a
Yeah.
15.
You can't build that 8,000 square foot one on Tote Road.
I think you'll see when you look at the map, though, even though there are a lot of big lots in Harpswell, the shoreland has already been taken and built on.
Well, I'm worried about the lady that brought up, everybody's developed on each side of
Yeah,
her.
I
She's
know
in the center, now she's RP. Well, what did you just do? What did we just do to her value?
Right.
I'd like to see that one, you know, the details of it. You know, if you can send me the island one, maybe that one, and then there was that other large area
It was this one on Birch Island.
that I
know it was
can,
the guy on
Oh,
the pole
Birch
island,
Island.
the one at the end, who
Yeah.
brought that up.
yeah.
What did you just do?
It was this
My
lot.
value.
Yeah, no,
There's
that's,
plenty
those
of
are all
room
good,
this
good
side.
questions, and that's why some municipalities are,
Like if
you
you
know,
picked up any one of these houses.
But you
trying
can
to
still
get
build on
rid of
that.
RP,
Yeah.
because they want maximum value of their
Sure.
land, so I mean,
Saying she could
I
make it.
understand
He
that.
just was making.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
because if any of the science is correct, and we overdeveloped the shoreland zone, the municipality stands a chance of losing the property value, assessed value as well, because
Exactly.
yeah, the water quality isn't there, the fisheries aren't there, what, you know, people enjoyed about Maine isn't there anymore.
That is exactly the point. And it's very hard to communicate that to
Yes,
the
it
individual
is.
property owner, but that's exactly the point. And furthermore, with regard to how much it costs the town, if we overdevelop our shoreline and there's a catastrophe, the town is not going to is going to be involved in rescue, fire and rescue. It's going to be involved in rebuilding roads. I mean, we were just at a site visit where there's a private road to a lot that it's on Gunpoint Road, and if there's a huge storm surge, actually, the folks that were, if I'm wrong, but the folks that wanted to develop the lot had to essentially rebuild part of the road.
Yep.
Because after the last rainfall, it was impassable for construction. And thank God the town doesn't own these roads, and they're not public roads, because if they were, our public works budget would be triple what it is. And so this is what we are trying to look at. This is what we're trying to prevent. And it's hard to convince the private property owner that their loss is actually benefits more people than them, but that's really where we are. And you know, you're on the front lines, and God love you, because it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, the property owner wants to maximize their value, maximize their use. That's why we have land use restrictions, because the maximum always the best overall use kind of deal. So,
Excuse me, may I just ask a question?
Yeah, Mary Ann.
has.
This is Mary Ann Nave. This is a conundrum. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to all the issues, and I sit on the other side thinking of what can we do to keep the area as healthy as possible and the resources as healthy as possible. One question I have when we're talking about all these islands, I know a number of the islands have conservation easements on them. Has that layer been put on this when we're looking at them? Okay.
I mean, other than,
Why is that?
I'm only thinking they're not going to be developed anyhow.
Why would that, what we would do with that information then is make a special case of not zoning it in a certain way, because they already have.
I guess I'm only thinking of Howard keeps bringing up these islands that we are developing, and how are we going to deal with that?
Those are private restrictions that can be removed. I mean, not easily,
Well, if they're owned by the land trust, yeah, but I'm
but
just,
the land trusts come and go and things like that.
And the land trust, those are in perpetuity.
they're in perpetuity. I'm just trying to bring out if we are making that a really large issue when it's not going to affect that many of the islands.
Okay.
And it's just a question, I don't know.
Well,
currently all the islands are.
no, but I
RP
mean,
except for where they are.
as the gentleman from
Any
Pole
islands.
Island said, we got to get this right and do it by a lot basis, so then they can do whatever they want to do when their restrictions run out.
I think it's a point, it's a point of information, but I'm not sure that it doesn't complicate things.
I don't know. I was just sitting there thinking of,
Yeah.
I know that so many of the islands have, well, the land trust owns a lot of the islands.
We
And like,
deal with what's on the ground.
yeah,
I mean, it'd be good to know if there was some kind of restrictions, because if somebody's saying, well, I can't build my fourth house, and they couldn't anyway,
Yeah.
you're like,
and I
thank you.
believe the open space plan talks about the islands being kept as open space as well.
I think the land trust easement information is useful, maybe just blunt criticism. turns out that half of these disputed lots are already protected.
That's
It
right.
removes an argument from the folks.
Yeah. It's a hard discussion, but I also know when I moved here, there were some ordinances that went in effect from the time I designed the house and started to build, that I had to make drastic changes to fit into the new ordinance. And I think that happens all the time whenever we have ordinance changes. It's just the luck of the draw.
Yeah.
Anyhow, this is very interesting.
Okay, so we have a plan to go forward. We're waiting on the DEP, then we will have to, I think Judy and Margaret ought to have a little discussion with Christie, though, about the fact that this is gonna get pricey, even just thinking about going to the lots.
Yeah, we were waiting, we had discussed coming up with a new contract, but we were waiting to have this meeting to figure out what do we want our contract to look like? And I still don't really feel like we have an answer. So maybe once we hear back from Jeff, we can have another workshop and then kind of develop a scope of work for Judy.
I think that's a good idea. And that's why.
Yeah? No, your face is saying no.
My face is worrying about making the March annual,
Oh, yeah.
because I think this has gone a long time since
Hmm?
with the DEP's indulgence of
Mhm.
this. We took a long time to get the floodplain stuff done.
Yeah, that wasn't our fault, but yeah, it took a long time. Yeah.
Partly why I would really love to see a written summary of this meeting.
Mhm.
So that when we do meet next, we know exactly what issues are still on the table and where we're starting from. We don't begin the next meeting.
Yeah.
So if we could just do just a summary.
Mhm.
So what are we looking at in terms of time? Do you have any idea?
Got to keep working on it. I mean, it's April. Plenty of time. I'm glad you've got me involved, and I'll turn it around as, don't let Judy go, the contract expire until she sends me an email, just some of these islands, for an example, Island and these other lots, just so I can put it on an email to my boss, and we'll further refine what we're doing here to meet the needs of Harpswell. Maybe we have to come up with a different approach. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know areas in town that are like, hey, yeah, for sure, this is densely developed, but those probably have already been taken off.
Totally.
So, but if you have other ideas of what'll work in Harpswell, certainly share them. What you're looking for as a municipality, long-term, short-term, various islands, whole island.
Well, Amy, you and Margaret did meet with some of the people that had specific, not, so it would be good, perhaps, if you felt you couldn't satisfy those people, give him those examples to see how DEP would deal with those. Or
The best
were you
example is
able-
really Pole Island. I mean, that's the best
was it
example.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking the more examples we have that we could talk about, like possibles, hypothetical, if you have this and this, then this would happen, that I think it would help the public, even if the public doesn't have personal skin in the game, but would get it like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, it's a good point. One of the issues with the property owner really felt that, and I've seen this before, other development drained the water flow onto their land, so they got designated resource protection on part of their land
That's
because of what other property owners had done to direct water to their property, and that they should be able to not be in resource protection. The other one was an inland wetland, which, was it 10 acres? Was it 9.9? And how did that, what Margaret has recommended is we need to do a little bit more, scientific work in terms of designating that wetland, really looking at whether that's an inland.
So that's a really interesting question. Jeff, we have 3 freshwater wetlands that are zoned shoreland residential that are really not supposed to be shoreland residential, but the town has struggled now for 30 years to figure out what we're going to do with them. And Marianne and I have been talking a lot about it, and she's going to talk to the Conservation Commission, but yeah, if you go, I'll show you the best one. This one. This is resource.
Mhm.
Why?
Why?
Why is one way, one is?
Some of it is.
I mean,
because
it's
of
been like
past
that since
politics.
'92 or something.
I mean, it looks, I mean, not being able to see it real up close, it looks like there's a stream connecting the one to the yeah, there's a
Yeah.
stream. So those 3 aren't connected. So the green one probably has the 10 acres. The little yellow one to the upper left, is that 10 acres?
What?
Or is it only 10
No,
acres if
this
you
is
connect it?
Yeah.
We wouldn't connect, we likely, based on that mapping, and I would need to look at it more closely, but let's just go with what we have. We wouldn't connect that little wetland to the top to the green wetland through a narrow channel. There's like a 100-foot rule. If the wetland is less than 100 feet wide for 100
What's the
foot
red
long,
slope?
they're not continuous.
I'm sorry?
That looks like that, and the one down on the left, lower left, doesn't look like it's connected either, from what I can see from the back here. I'm not sure if it's 10 acres in and of itself.
There's the,
And it's not just 10 acres of wetlands. Sometimes you have open water wetlands with fringes of,
Yeah, that's what we really need to.
Basically, when you read the report from the delineation, it was, of course, it was done for Waterfall and Wading Bird because that's what it was done for. This is a very low value. It's shrub scrub and forested. And there was this issue that at that time, they were talking also about the 100-foot floodplain, which seems to be really weird when you look at those old maps, what they showed flood zones. And it was sort of, well, we'll put it there because of this. But it never was very high value.
so the one that's in RP now is low value.
Well, actually, then what happened is in 2000, when they did the shoreline zoning ordinance changes, these 3 that are in question now were left out. There was never any really, the discussion always was, even through the Conservation Commission, was it was political. Well, a lot of it, when you start to look at what the background in it is, yes, it's political, but it was kind of really low value to begin with.
Well, there's 2 different things there. There's, okay, why are you putting it into RP? Because of the wildlife habitat or because of the 10 acres?
It wasn't either.
Okay, so I can't help you there. I mean, if it doesn't meet the criteria, it doesn't need to be mapped.
My
I'm
next
assuming
question-
that there's some criteria present.
My next question was going to be who, all of you sitting here, because I'm not sure where to go. My sense is that there are resource protected areas in town that might not be because of shoreline zoning ordinances, that we have no way of protecting. We have an open space plan at some point. Who would I go to find out the way to think about how the town might protect these?
Yeah.
that
That
begin with
can be
habit?
done with shoreline zoning. Chapter 1013A gives the municipalities to add other important wildlife habitat, natural sites of significant scenic or aesthetic value, other areas, and IWWH. Those are all optional things. It's usually based on a comprehensive plan.
That's what I mean, that is why, one thing, why I really wanted to talk about this with the, I don't mean to get all excited, but we never had this discussion.
Yeah.
And we should have had the discussion.
So going forward, what I'm thinking is, what I would like the Conservation Commission to start thinking about, for us to look at these areas in town that are wetland 6 right now, but that's only one of them, to look at other areas that we might want to protect. Who is the best agency at the state to go through? Is that beginning with Habitat?
I would,
I'm
yeah,
not sure.
IW, yeah, beginning with Habitat, IFW, are gonna have the biologists, they're gonna help you. I'm not a biologist.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be in the comp plan. The nice thing about comp plans is it's in the comp plan. When you're at public meeting, you can be like, well, it's in the comp plan. I mean, some municipalities will just
It's in our open
say,
space plan.
yeah, okay, whatever. But some municipalities just say these, floodplain, steep slopes, and anything else depicted on the map is RP, and don't even really give a reason.
Is that still considered RP then?
If you map it and you say somewhere in your ordinance that it's RP, it's RP. The problem with that is a few of those that I've worked with all happened in the 70s, and nobody remembers why they're RP anymore. So I really recommend that you somehow identify it for everybody, so that moving on, we know
What
why.
I'd like to see happen over a period of time is for us to speak with, let's just say beginning with Habitat, is what I'm thinking, to have biologists come in and talk to us about what the considerations, similar to what you did for watershore and waterfowl type of information, so that we could then look at these areas and see if they qualify for something that we do want to protect. And then it would go to being an ordinance, and I'm not sure what type of ordinance it is, but I'd be looking to the state or somebody for that.
It could be part of your shoreland, but I would hope that wouldn't become part of what we're trying to do here. Right now, we need to
No,
get
no, no,
the
I don't want that to be-
RP straightened out as far as minimum requirements and the contiguous slopes straightened out for minimum requirements.
There are many ways you can do that with zoning. You can do overlay zones, there's lots.
That's
of
what I'm
things that we
guessing,
can
yeah.
talk about.
And that's something I just have to know more
But there
about.
has to be a rational nexus between the zoning ordinance and what it is that you're trying to
I
protect.
think if you look at section 13.1, the first sentence is the general reason for the RP zone. That gives you a 100 miles worth of regulations if you wanted to put it in the RP zone. It talks about protecting of biological ecosystems, productive I mean, it's very broad. The section goes on to say what has to be in here, the minimum
Right.
requirements, but that's just minimum requirements. We can put whatever we want in the RP, as long as we can justify it to that sentence. But you have to be able to,
It has to be just.
Yeah, and I think of this as being something that you're not going to just jam it in. I think it has to be something that is discussed, get the biology behind it, get the science behind it, start presenting it to the public, and over a period of time, or a year or so, then you move to making it an ordinance.
and the comp plan is aspirational. There's plenty of
I've been told
environmental
that,
language in
yeah.
there. You know that. I mean, we can justify it based on the comp plan as well.
Well, a lot of comp plans just identify areas in town that are significant or
yeah,
something. That's
right.
all you need. And you don't, like I said, you don't need that. I've seen ordinances that just say, and what's shown, any RP shown on the map.
I'm just trying to think of a solid
Somebody
way
knew why
to
it was
move
there.
towards that and doing it.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you need more justification than that, but there's a lot of options.
Good.
You can do it through shoreland zoning, you can do it through other ordinances. I mean, to the extent that, this is causing problems for this remapping, I think you have to look at it
No,
from a
that's
shoreland
just-
perspective. And if it's not supposed to be in shoreland and you don't have any justification for it being in shoreland, I think it should be taken off the map.
I think, yeah, and I'd
And
like, that's
especially
what
if
I'd
it's
like us
causing
to do.
problems with everything else.
Yeah,
And, just a quick look at those, the criteria would be, they might not need.
we
to be
keep
in
trying to
shoreline.
justify that reason, and it doesn't, but I'm not, I guess what I'm trying to say, it is a reason that does need protection,
Yeah.
But we're trying to jam it into a definition that isn't applicable.
Have to be shoreland either.
Exactly.
We lost an historic farm development a couple of years ago. We could have had some kind of designation,
Sure, yeah.
which we never did, and that could have been an overlay.
It could have been overlaid.
And we
Well, that's good. We can talk more about
yeah.
the method to
is
do
a-
this,
a
but
larger discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will meet again soon. We are going to look at big lots, DEP, look at how to handle big lots and the density question, and maybe some other issues that will come up. Then we'll get together again.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Margaret, for pulling this together. You've really been,
Margaret, can we get, still the big lots, can we get someone from Land Trust, at least tell us where the conservation easements
Yeah, of course. It is mapped
I have
to a certain extent on the Begins with Habitat maps. They map all the conservation in town, but those are a little bit old, so.
We for the comp plan, we updated it.
Oh, all right.
So maybe you can put that to us, so that
Yep.
we'll at least not fuss about areas that really can't be
Right.
developed.
Okay.
Whole island, we'll just take care of it one of these days. Maybe.
all right, thank you, everybody.
You have a